Well, it's official. I've entered a new phase in life, that kind of crazy, wild phase where you talk about the weather all the time. Like old people do. And apparently I have entered into old peopleness, old peoplehood. I've walked right into it. Didn't see it coming. I mean, just a year ago, I was like, why do people talk about the weather all the time? I just wanted to, anybody brings up the weather, I wanted to punch them in the face. And I want to punch myself in the face because I'm really interested in the weather. It's like the number one app on my phone that I check, the weather app. What's going on with the weather? And so today it's kind of nasty outside. It's snowing and ice and sleet, and you weird people decided to show up in a church building for church. So here we are. This is great. And then same in Concord and over at Manchester. It's like, all right, here we are. And then you guys online, there you are. Really smart. But it's great that we have options and we can do whatever we want. And it used to be, as a preacher, you would check the weather and you would really fixate on it because you're like, okay, if the weather's going to be bad, nobody's going to be there, and my whole self-worth will be demolished, and I'll be depressed all week. And then you would also drive to church, and then you would try to guilt everybody. Once you got to church, you'd jump on social media and you're like, hey, just drove to church, roads are great, so make sure you come or you're going to hell. Anyway, not really, but close. There's a lot of that goes on. And, times are changing, and it's amazing, to be free. But I was interested, last week, the reason I, have this, beautiful glow about myself right now is not the lighting. It's because I left New Hampshire for a week, which is best thing you can do in February. But last week I was in Los Angeles, staying at Huntington Beach. I was at a conference for megachurch pastors where I got to share the Decentralized book with 75 megachurch pastors from across the country. And it was pretty cool watching, us kind of unpack that a little bit. And, it's an interesting spectrum. Like half the room of megachurch pastors are like, yes, and wow, and we're in, and this is going to be crazy. And the other half is like, no, this is terrible, and we're not doing it, and digging our heels in. And, it's kind of really representative of the church world. But while I was there, the first morning I got up, and I was sitting out on my balcony, and, watching the sun come up at Huntington Beach. And I was sitting there in a pair of shorts, no shirt, no shoes or socks, just drinking a cup of coffee. And down below me, running on the beach, a woman jogged across wearing a giant puffer coat and a beanie on her head, gloves on her hands. And I looked and I laughed at her. I was like, what in the world? But I had my phone. I was like, I better check the weather. It was 39 degrees. And that's how I know I'm a New Hampshireite. I'm a New Englander because I'm making fun of people wearing coats when it's 39 degrees. So I was thrilled to be in Los Angeles, but it never got above 16. It rained the whole time, and people kept apologizing for their weather. I'm like, this is glorious. I love it. The other thing that happened is my 18-year-old daughter, Eliza, traveled with me to Los Angeles. She travels with me sometimes, helps me out. And when I'm on the road, love that time with her. But she was also looking at a college in Los Angeles while we were there. Now that's a crazy thing to think about. How in the world did I get so old that I look at the weather, and I have a child I'm getting ready to send off to college, an 18-year-old. In fact, right now she's in Nicaragua for a week, like in a whole other country, I know, on a mission trip, and we're excited about that and thrilled and love her and what she's doing. But it made me think back to when I first found out that Summer was pregnant. Summer told me we're expecting. And I was so excited because, our desire was to have a family and to have kids, and I've always wanted to be a dad. And, we were awfully young, very, very young, as you can imagine. And she tells me that she's pregnant. Well, the excitement is there, and you want to share and tell everybody that we're expecting a child. But then some of the reality starts to set in, like we are not prepared to be parents, to be responsible for another human life. We can't take care of ourselves. And so somebody gave us this book called What to Expect When You're Expecting. And it was like this thick. And we devoured it because we needed the information. Like, what do we do? What are we supposed to do? What's going to change? And we're reading through this, and then we're taking the birthing classes and the parenting classes and getting prepared to have a child. And then, of course, the day came for Eliza to be born November 22nd, 2000. And it was a great day. I didn't have any trouble at all with the delivery. Thought it was easy, smooth sailing. I don't know what the big deal is. It was great. And so now we have this baby, and it's amazing. We're sitting there in the hospital, and there's nurses there, and, we would have Eliza for a little bit, and then the nurses would come and take her and, put her in the other room. And this was just great. It was just a great time in the hospital. But then they kicked us out. told us that we had to leave. And that's when the reality was that we were like responsible for this baby, and we were gonna have to take this baby to our home that we'd been getting ready and preparing for, but I mean, now it's just undeniable. And Summer says to me, hey, go get the car seat, which precipitated our very first argument as parents. Right then and there, because I had installed the car seat in the car, but it had this little carrier. We obviously had never practiced putting our child in the carrier. We didn't know how she went in, how to work the straps and everything, and there was nobody there to help us. And that was the moment where we're like, wait, we really are on our own. Like, they're gonna let us leave this hospital room with legs and arms sticking out all over the place and straps in the wrong place, and nobody's gonna say a word, and they didn't. And we got her into the car, totally in the car seat the wrong way, but she's in the car, and we start driving home, and panic is just coming over both of us. Neither of us is saying a word. And I said to Summer, hey, do you want me to call my mom? She said, yes. Now, my mom lived about an hour away and had volunteered to come help us, but we said, no, we'll be fine. We can handle it. I called her right then from the car, and I said, hey, Mom, do you think you would be willing to come to the house? She goes, sure, my bag's already in the car. And an hour later, she was there. And she came through the front door, set her bag down, sat in the recliner in the living room, had a book on her lap, and she just said, I'm gonna sit right here. You let me know if you want me to do anything. I'm available to you. And just her presence was such a comfort. But she said, you want me to cook dinner? You want me to do some laundry? Want me to watch Eliza? Whatever you want. Just let me know, I'll do it. I said, thanks, Mom. Summer and I are gonna go in the other room with Eliza and get settled in. We did. Summer said, you know what, I think we should get some sleep. So she takes Eliza out, hands her to my mom, and my mom takes her and is like, would you like me to watch Eliza so you can get some sleep? Summer said, yes. And my mom said, no problem. Any special instructions? And Summer looks right at her and said, just keep her breathing. And turned around and walked out, because that's really our primary goal as parents. That's when the panic hit my mom, just the reality, well, this is alive and this has happened and this is real and we're responsible. The reason I'm telling you all this is because that's the point we're at as a church. We have these great expectations of what God is doing. And to be really clear, the reason I wrote the words that are in this book and the reason why I want you to read them is because I want you to know what to expect and what's going on here, because it's gonna be crazy and it's gonna be wild, but it's amazing what God is doing. And I personally believe that he's giving birth to a third expression of the church. And what I mean by that is currently we have like the Catholic Church and we have the Protestant Church. And what God is doing is he is releasing his church in a decentralized fashion where we really are understanding and people are getting in and have the tools and resources available to them to truly be the church. That you are temples of the Holy Spirit, that everywhere you go, you are the church and you are having church and God is moving. And so we at Manchester Christian Church, MCC, we've been a part of this. We've been praying for one, which is a very decentralized prayer. So the one thing we ask you to do, pray for one. God, please give me one person to share your love with. In fact, let's not just say it, let's actually pray it. You wanna do it? God, please give me one person to share your love with. That's a decentralized prayer. We're saying, God, put your love in me so I can take it with me wherever I go. And so we've been doing this. So what God is doing as he's provided the tools and the way and changing the way the world works and thinks through the internet and other resources is he's preparing us to take this gospel message to the very ends of the earth. And you know what, whether it ends up, I don't know what it'll be called, this movement and this third expression. The words that I'm using right now are just decentralized to help us kind of grasp and think about that. But it is a move that God is doing, but it's totally biblical and it's been his plan from the beginning. So if you go back to the book of Acts, Jesus has been crucified, dead, and buried, risen again. He's given the Holy Spirit to his disciples. Pentecost comes there, the Holy Spirit indwells them. They become temples of the Holy Spirit. And that God is adding to their number daily, those who are being saved. They're meeting together as often as they can, both in the temple courts and in their homes. So essentially decentralized already. Wherever they are the church, and God keeps adding to their number. And they're there in Jerusalem, and God's doing a great thing, and this is the centralized place where the church is. It's just in Jerusalem. But then this persecution breaks out against the church, and they are scattered. They have to flee Jerusalem. Now, if you were in that first century church and in Jerusalem, and you're experiencing all these wonderful things, and now a persecution breaks out, in your mind, you would certainly think this is horrific and horrible, because it was. And it would be hard to connect the dots between, okay, this bad, awful, really disturbing, challenging thing that's happening is actually going to spread the gospel to the world. If that church hadn't been persecuted or scattered, we wouldn't be here right now. You wouldn't be online right now. You wouldn't be in Concord or in Manchester right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation at all. And yet when you're in the midst of it, it's tough and it's scary and you don't know what's going to happen or what's going to come of this. And so our memory verse for our series is found in Acts chapter 8, verse 4, all of us. Let's read it out loud together as we put it on the screen. It says, those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. This is the decentralized church. That's been God's plan from the very beginning. It's not just one voice or one pastor or one apostle or one shepherd. It's the whole community, the whole family of God who are preaching the gospel by the way we live, the way that we think, the way that we speak, the way that we share God's love every single place we go. That's why your homes are sanctuaries, your cars are sanctuaries, your office is a sanctuary, your school is a sanctuary, because you're there and you're the church. It's really a beautiful thing. It's like, when people say, well, they kicked prayer out of school. No, they didn't. You can't kick prayer out of school. People pray all the time in school. You could say, well, I can't worship in my office. You most certainly can, and I assume that you are. At least, why wouldn't you? To have a song in your heart and joy in your heart where you are exalting God. That's what it means to worship. And your words are kind and compassionate and gracious and grace-filled and grace-fueled. Of course, because you're the church. So every environment is a worship environment, and we are being sent as we're experiencing this third expression, and we have these incredible tools at our disposal. So I want you to know what to expect. And here's the primary thing is this: the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. There are a lot of people who are kind of out there, who think that the church is falling apart. The church in America is just in shambles. No, it's not. The same percentage of people who went to church 50 years ago are going to church right now, are engaged in worship right now. But there's more people, so there's actually more followers of Jesus today than ever before. In fact, there's a higher percentage in the United States going to church now than 100 years ago. And so God is on the move, and yet there's this false message out there that says that it's bad and it's not good, and he's moving even more through the resources that he's provided for us to engage in his church and to be the church all the time. The best is yet to come. The last thing in the world we would ever want to do is revert to something else, because what God is doing now is the best it's ever been. And tomorrow's going to be even better. And the next day is even better, because God is on the move and we are his church. And so some things to expect as we experience the decentralized church. The first one is many church leaders will be fearful. Now, I think it's important to point this out, that fear will be there. So there's the unknown, there's fear of the unknown. There's fear of loss. So just think, if you will, those who have the most to lose might be those who are leading churches that have large infrastructures, like a lot of facilities, a lot of campuses, a lot of staff, a lot of ministry, a lot of programs. That's kind of your identity sometimes. And what's it going to cost you as people are experiencing and expressing church differently? That's a challenge. By the way, this is nothing new. When Jesus came, he ushered in a new paradigm. There's a massive shift from Jewish law and the Pharisees, who are responsible for taking, these 613 Old Testament commandments, interpreting them and applying them, and then holding people to them. The big job. And that was their job and their role. Plus, they were representatives of the people, the nation of Israel, who were under this Roman oppression. So they had this political environment that they were navigating, plus a religious system that they were trying to navigate, and they have a responsibility for it, and Jesus comes in and messes up the whole thing. So it only stands to reason that they were fearful. A lot of times, like in church, we bag on the Pharisees, and we scoff at them. They were doing their job, and it was a really, really hard job. And so while I don't want to be Pharisaical, I can empathize with what they were experiencing, just like I can empathize with those who are struggling with what God is doing today. So to give you an example of this, one of the coolest miracles Jesus did, just kind of mind-blowing, was when he raised Lazarus from the dead. Now, I know sometimes when you think about the Bible, you think these miracles like walking on water and turning water into wine and the feeding of the 5,000, making the blind see. You probably just think, well, that happened all the time. It never happened. It was not commonplace. It was crazy what Jesus was doing, and people their minds were blown. Plus, the things he said were completely altering and changing the way they were thinking. I mean, his presence, his 3 years in the public eye, completely changed the world. And of these miracles, the raising of Lazarus from the dead was the greatest before his own resurrection. And it was really a precursor to his resurrection. So in John 11, Jesus gets word that his friend Lazarus is sick. Lazarus has two sisters, Mary and Martha. But Jesus goes, no, we're going to hang out before we go. And his disciples were like, well, we should probably go. You can heal him. He's like, nah, he's going to die. He's like, he goes, it's okay. It won't end in death, but he's going to die. So anyway, they show up, and Jesus is met by one of the sisters. And she's like, Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Translation, she says, dude, you're late. Where were you in this one? My brother, we're buds. You eat at our house all the time. You bring all these people over. Like, I thought we were close. You knew he was sick. Where were you? You ever feel like that? God, you're late. Thanks for nothing. Because it feels that way sometimes. And that's what she's feeling. That's not being irreverent. Jesus goes, oh, no. Listen, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And she's like, uh-huh. Like, yeah, like kind of like we do, like, yes, but we still get really freaked out by death because it's scary and it's unknown and it's not what we expected, even though we know it's coming. Anyway, so Jesus then goes to the tomb after he weeps, and outside the tomb, he says, okay, roll away the stone. Let's get this show on the road. Roll away the stone. And Lazarus' sister's like, dude, no, he's rotting in there. He's been dead for days. It stinks. And he's like, I just asked you if you believed, and you said yes. Like, I'm doing something here. Roll away the stone. Let's get this out of the way. Lazarus, come out. And the dead man walks out, and he's alive. Now, this is like amazing. There's all these people because Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they were pillars of their community. They were kind of a big deal. They had lots and lots of friends. There's people from all over who've come to grieve with them. The funeral's like over, and they're still there. And now the dead man walks out of the tomb. And people are like, dang. Like, this is legit, this is real, this is happening. So they start talking. This is what we do. When you experience something like this, you start talking. When a miracle happens, you talk. You tell your story, and they're telling their story. Plus, you got this guy Lazarus there who was dead, now he's alive. Everybody he meets is like, wait, you're not like the Lazarus, are you? It's like, well, yeah, that's me. And they go, what happened? And he's like, well, I was dead. Now I'm alive. And they go, no way. He's like, yeah. And they go, that's amazing. He goes, tell me about it. And they're like, tell me again. Okay, I was dead. Now I'm alive. You see, that's how you tell your story. I was dead, now I'm alive. I was blind, but now I see. I was lost, but now I'm fine. I was a sinner, but now I'm a saint. And this is evidence. This is evidence to your world, the people you encounter. And it's undeniable. Irrefutable evidence. And this is causing a problem. So the Pharisees who see the risk involved, and now there's this guy who was dead, who's alive, walking around, and people are believing in Jesus. John 11, verse 45, it says, therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did, the raising of Lazarus from the dead, they believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Snitches. Or they were just really excited. I don't know. Verse 47, then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. They're freaked out. The Pharisees are freaked out. And by the way, rightfully so. Both their concerns come out to be true. They say, if this guy keeps doing this, we're going to lose our temple, our way of worship. Our whole world revolves around this thing. And our nation, the political environment, where if you have this Jewish uprising, the Romans are going to come in and squash that. So their position of power, yes, maybe they had some issues with being power hungry and control. Maybe. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, though, and let's say they were pure-hearted in this. It's still a struggle. This working relationship with the Roman government is really delicate, and it's really rough. And they say, if this continues, it's going to go bad. And it does. What they feared actually happened. Jesus told them it would. He said, oh, yeah, I'll destroy this temple, I'll raise it again. Maybe he was talking about his body, but they thought he was talking about the physical temple. But in reality, he was saying, oh, the physical temple in Jerusalem, it's going away. In fact, in 70 AD, just like, 35 years after this occurs, The temple was destroyed by the Romans. Not one stone was left on another, and it's never been rebuilt because God doesn't need a temple anymore. He has a temple. You. We, the church, we are temples of the Holy Spirit. We are his dwelling place. We don't need to construct a building to house God because he is in us and he is with us through the indwelling of his Holy Spirit. But the Pharisees here had a real problem, and they were fearful. They're like, our way of life is about to end, and they felt responsible for it. Well, the same is happening right now with many who've been involved in leadership in the church, who have invested a lot in our current expressions of church and the way that we've done things. As God is changing things, they're like, well, we could lose our temple and our power, our control, our authority. So just think, if you will, like a centralized expression of religion that controls people. That says, here's what you do, here's what you don't do, here's where you're supposed to be, here's the rules. Like, people are all the time asking me for the rules. Like, can I go here? Can I do this? Is this allowed? And I'm like, well, what would Jesus do? What do you feel like the Holy Spirit's telling you to do? You know, what will help reach the most people in the shortest time? And here are the questions we're asking. And we're asking different questions today than ever before. The old way of thinking in church leadership was, okay, here we are, we have a church, and we have a building, and we have these ministries that are going on. And so you meet somebody new, like we get to meet one of you or anybody listening right now, and we would immediately evaluate you as a church leader and say, okay, what do you have to offer? We might even ask you some diagnostic questions like, what are you good at? What do you like to do? What's your job? And then we would look for the right committee or team to put you on, the right ministry for you to be a part of. We would be evaluating that to say, okay, how can you come help what we already have do what we're doing? But as we've been praying for the last 8 years, our questions as a church have already transformed and changed. Now, when we meet you, we're praying for one. You are the church. You're being the church. We've been asking for quite a while, what's God doing? What are you doing? What are you already doing? And then the next question is, how can we help? How can we resource you? How can we send you? Not how can we hold you and keep you and control you, but rather how can we empower and release you and send you? Totally different way of thinking. It's an amazing way, but it's crazy. And a lot of those, particularly those with the most to lose, are fearful of this, and we can understand that because there's some unknown. Now, the problem with that is fear is often expressed in anger. And there's really nothing nastier than an angry Christian, particularly an angry Christian leader with some influence. And so to be aware of that, don't be aware that this could happen. Don't respond to nastiness with nastiness. Be kind and gentle and compassionate and gracious. And God will do his thing. Now, because of that and some other reasons, the second thing I would tell you to expect is it's going to be messy. What God is doing is going to be messy. It's always, when God's doing something, it's just messy because it wrecks our kingdoms. What we're building on our own. He comes in and he's like, I'm the king. There's only one king, so we're going to build my kingdom. And there's a messiness to that. Now, it's messy because of some of the responses that people have because of fear. And you have some of this craziness that happens kind of inside the church, fighting and turning on each other. Don't engage in that. Like, I can look at you with extreme confidence, all of you, and I know I can say this for a fact. You have never heard me say a disparaging word about another church or pastor. I know that's true. You want to know how I know it's true? Because I don't do it. Not only do I not do it, I, for the most part, don't think it. Once you stop doing it, your thoughts start to change. So don't do that. That's no good. It's not helpful at all. The second way I know it's going to be messy is because when you're experiencing new things, you need to try new things, new methods. And the only way to try new methods is to experiment. And let's think about scientists. As scientists are doing experimentations, the vast majority of experiments, are they successful or do they fail? Well, they fail because you keep doing them until you get one that works. And so the same is true as we are trying new methodology, as we're expressing different things in different ways, as we're trying to release and equip, and we're experimenting, there will be failure. And it's okay. You're empowered to try things. But I'm going to tell you exactly what I told our staff when we went through the Decentralized book. I told them, guys, you need to experiment in your ministries and try things, and it is okay to fail. And they're like, seriously, we can fail? And they go, yes, just do me a favor, do it fast and cheap. That's all I ask of you. Do it fast and cheap. We don't want to fail. We don't want to miss the mark, but we need to try things. And when we fail, make it fast and cheap. Same thing I would say to you. Try stuff. And it's okay to fail. Just learn the lesson quickly and then tell your story, share your story so that we can all learn from it and you'll help equip and empower others. And so there's going to be a messiness to that. Another thing to expect is that there will be a choir of voices instead of soloists. And I am like super passionate about this. I think it's such a great thing. Instead of listening to only one voice, like me saying, well, I'm your pastor. I'm the one who's going to tell you all the things you're supposed to do and all the things you're supposed to believe. Only listen to me. We live in this amazing time where you can listen to a multitude of voices. But even better than that, and we'll get to it, is you get to join your voice in. We're a choir, not soloists. And this is exciting. It used to be that when somebody would say, well, yeah, I was listening to an Andy Stanley sermon. And they would say that to me. I'm not going to lie. There was a part of me that was like, dude, you're cheating on me. Like, you're listening to another pastor? What, am I not good enough? I mean, what's he have that I don't have? As there's a human element to that. But then there's like, well, he has a different voice. He has different experiences. You may connect in a different way. Well, why would I want it just be my voice or just my voice and Andy Stanley's voice? Why wouldn't it be all our voices? And now we have access to tools that enable us to do that, and it's a beautiful thing. And so this kind of thought process that says, who do you follow? Do you follow MCC or another church? Do you go to this church or that church? Do you listen to this voice or that voice? It goes all the way back to the very first century church. The Apostle Paul was dealing with an issue where some people are like, well, I follow this guy Apollos, and other guys, well, I like Paul better. And he writes about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And we still haven't learned the lesson, but I think we're going to. Verse 4, Paul writes, for one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos. Are you not mere human beings? What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord assigned each to his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. Love this text. He's like already saying, we've been going at this for like 20 years. And already you guys are like, well, I follow this guy, I follow. No, we follow Jesus. That's who we follow. But you are co-workers, you're co-laborers, you're God's field, meaning that he's planted in you and he is producing a harvest in you. You are God's building. And so this idea of joining our voices together to reach our ones, like I have ones and you have ones, but it's not my singular voice that is going to share God's love alone. It's our voices together reaching our ones. And so we join our voices together. Plus we join them with other churches and other ministries. We're not in competition with one another. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this phrase, stealing sheep. You ever heard that before? And when I was growing up in church, there was this word that is like never used anymore. It's called proselytizing. I never hear it anymore, but people used to get really bent out of shape. They're like, well, that church across town is proselytizing. And what they meant was, you had a Methodist church who was trying to convert the Baptists to Methodism, or you had the Episcopal church who's trying to make the Lutherans Episcopal and so forth. They're proselytizing, and it was like a big deal. Well, in today's world, a lot of times, you get a church that's growing, people will say, well, they're stealing sheep. I've met with pastors who essentially their comment to me was, hey, you stole a bunch of my sheep. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because here's the deal. Yes, I am a shepherd, but they are not my sheep. I want to be really clear on this. I'm a shepherd, but they're not my sheep. They're his sheep. And he has lots of shepherds. And he can move the sheep wherever he wants to move the sheep, anytime he wants to move the sheep. All I know is I want to plant some amazing grass. I want to feed the sheep everything I've got. I want to encourage the sheep. But if he is leading the sheep to another shepherd, let's go. Besides that, all of us are shepherds in some ways. God is putting people in our sphere that we have the opportunity to shepherd. And so what I'm driving at here is this. There is no stealing of sheep. There is only the sharing of shepherding. That's a different way of thinking. That way we're not, isn't it crazy to think that churches would be in competition with each other? We're gonna compete with the church across town. That is the most insane, devilish, evil thing you could conceive of. There's one kingdom, which means there's one king. There is the shepherd, and we are under shepherds, and they're his sheep. And so we share in the shepherding. And what happens there is we embrace that, then people are liberated and set free. I was fortunate. I did student ministry working with middle school and high school kids in the 1990s. And one of the things we discovered in our student ministry is that kids, they had access to transportation, and there were lots of churches in the area, and they didn't have this baggage that said you can only go to one church. So they started attending multiple churches, and we had a group of kids that were attending 4 churches. And one time, I just kind of asked them, I was like, hey, what's up with this? How come you go to 4 churches? Like, is our church not good enough to meet all your needs? And essentially they said, yeah, it's not. I was like, well, Al, what do you mean? And they go, oh, Bo, listen, we love this church. I go, cool, tell me, what do you love about our church? They said, well, this is the church where people get saved. I was like, right on. I'm in with that. And they go, yeah, we are too. We know that if we bring our friends to anything we're doing, they're going to be accepted, they're going to be loved, they're going to be welcomed, and they're going to encounter Jesus and have a chance to respond to him. Because we love it. So that's why we come here a lot, and because we have lots of friends that we want to know Jesus. I'm like, right on. I go, well, what about that church over there? And they go, oh, man, that church is so amazing at worship, creating worship environments. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, they extended a little bit longer, and their musicians are amazing, but they're really in tune to like what the Holy Spirit's doing in worship, and they create an environment and a space where we kind of just get caught up and lost in worship, and sometimes we just really crave that and want to be a part of that, and it's special, and so we go there to worship. I'm like, oh, yeah, I like that. Go, you should do that. I go, what about that church over there? And they go, oh, well, that church has the best youth room. I go, what do you mean? Well, they got a pool table and bean bags, and it's open every Friday night until midnight so we can show up. They have snacks, and there's like adults who are there who serve drinks and beverages, and all our friends, we can go and hang out there, which, by the way, this was the church the other youth pastors all made fun of because we said, well, there's just a fun hangout. They're not really sharing Jesus. Oh, so sad. Because I started thinking about it, I was like, wait a minute, so you have a place you can go. I said, why do you want to do that? And they go, it's either that or we're going to go to all the parties. We're going to go out to an abandoned road or to somebody's house, and there's going to be a keg, and the police will show up. And you know what? There's a place where we can take our friends and we can hang out. We don't have to worry about any of that. That's the church where we go to do that. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I said, what about the 4th church? They said, oh, that's the church all our parents want us to go to. And that's cool too. Well, those kids who were kind of liberated from the thought or idea that, you had to just go to this one boxed expression and that's it. They're adults now. And we're experiencing this in all facets of life, in the way we consume, the way we bank, the way we do everything. And this choir of voices is such a powerful thing. And so like some of you right now, maybe you want to participate in worship with another church. Cool. Go enjoy it, or maybe you're like hanging out with us, but you're doing it on the down low, like you work with the CIA and you're trying to, because you don't want anybody to find out. Just relax, enjoy Jesus, be refreshed, be encouraged, because there's one church, and we're all about building him up. But besides that, he's sending us all out anyway, so be encouraged. Quickly, a few things to expect. Physical attendance will decrease as engagement increases. So don't be surprised if in our buildings, and by the way, buildings aren't going away. I know everybody's a little freaked out about that. Like, so we're going online only? No. Buildings are a tool, and as long as we look at them as a tool, meaning that it's not the church, it's just a tool we'll use for as long as that building is effective and useful, but knowing it's on the table, maybe we don't need it, maybe we need another one somewhere else. Our physical attendance in buildings across the country, not just with MCC, that's decreasing, not in the number of people we're reaching, but in the frequency people are attending. And that's just because we've changed in the way that we have access to information. You are able to have access to information all the time. You can binge watch sermons, et cetera, and so forth. So, but that doesn't mean engagement decreases. So a lot of church leaders are really freaked out about this, going, well, that means people will be less engaged because that's what it meant in the past. That's not what it means today. People are actually going to be more engaged because they have more access through the apps, through social media, through the website, through all the different ways that we can connect, even just cell phone technology and being able to call people and talk about Jesus and pray. It changes things. So engagement will actually increase. So we're not freaked out by that. We still want to have more worship services in more places. We'll reach more people with fewer resources. And so this is kind of a wisdom thing as we embrace technology and the tools that God makes available to us. It will reach more people with less resources, which means there will be more resources to allocate to other things as opposed to the infrastructure typically needed to run all the ministries and programs of a church. When you look at being decentralized and sending people, that's going to up the resources that are available to empower and equip and resource as opposed to support local church infrastructure. People are going to have a global view of Christianity. And this is really significant. We already are experiencing this. It used to be kind of we were isolated in our own bubble, maybe by East Coast culture, or it might be defined by things that were happening in the Bible Belt, but certainly kind of an Americanized view of the church. Well, through technology and communication now, we're able to learn from all parts of the world, and God is doing incredible things. For instance, Rooted comes from Kenya. And so Rooted was started in Kenya. It went to a church in California, and now a church in New Hampshire is doing Rooted. And we didn't come up with Rooted, we didn't start it, but let me tell you, Rooted is a game changer for us. It is very much a pray for one program as it allows us to experience what God is doing, and it gives us tools for a lifetime of following Jesus. 10 weeks, which is great because we have no idea how long we're going to get to have influence in your life. And so if we can get 10 weeks, we know that you can walk away with tools for a lifetime of following Jesus. So it's a 10-week discipleship journey, experiences. This would not have come out of the American church. It's not how we do things. God did it in Kenya, California, New Hampshire. And it's a 10-week discipleship journey where you have these experiences, a prayer experience, a serve experience. There's an experience where strongholds in our lives are identified. Stronghold, something that has a stronghold on you. Like if you ever feel like you want to follow Jesus, like you really have this pull, you want to share his love, you want to be a part of what he's doing, but something's holding you back, it's got a stronghold on you. Usually you don't know what it is because it's a blind spot. Well, Rooted helps identify those and break them so that you're set free to be who God's called you to be. Powerful stuff. And this 10-week discipleship journey, if you'll commit to that, then as we send and are released and as we go, it's a powerful thing, but that's a global thing that came from Kenya. And so we're seeing that more and more. And then one other thing to expect, there'll be less division over stupid stuff, which is just great. Look, you're free. See, churches divide over stupid stuff like methodology, worship style, programs, ministries. They divide sometimes over peripheral doctrinal issues. Like I may say something and you're like, well, I don't agree with that. Okay, it's all right. You're not trapped. And you don't have to agree. Besides that, I can be wrong, and so can you. So it's okay. We don't have to fight. We don't have to divide. We don't need foolish and stupid arguments, and we don't need to be quarrelsome. Instead, you're free, and you're empowered. And so what happens is if you cage people up, like think about caging animals, a caged animal either becomes docile or nasty, neither of which is helpful in building the kingdom. We need people who are empowered and alive and free, who are engaged, not docile or nasty. And so that's what God is doing right now, and you're a part of it. So be free, be encouraged, most of all, be the church, because you are the church. And you are plan A, and there is no plan B, but game on, God is doing something great. Guys, the best is yet to come. And so right now, as we share in a time of communion, I want you to know this is your invitation into what God is doing. He's picking you, and he knows you. He knows what he's getting into here. He knows you better than you know yourself, and he declares his love over you, and so he offers himself to you. Take the bread, take the juice as a way of saying yes to Jesus. And after we've all been served, we'll eat and drink together. But today, while you hold that bread and juice, will you just offer yourself, your body, as a living sacrifice to God? You are the church, God's field, God's building. Go and be the church. Let's go.